Mike DeHaan joins me here today, and you could join his show, subscribe to his show by going to collectingkeys.com. Again, it's collectingkeys.com, and we're going to cover quite a few different topics here, but it's primarily going to be focused about how to scale your real estate investing business. Mike, I really appreciate your time here today.
Yeah, Jack, thanks for having me on.
So I'm curious, like you're doing the collectingkeys.com podcast. What made you start a show?
So we started Collecting Keys primarily because my business partner and I, like we're old friends from college. And so whenever we would get together, like with our wives, after we started our business, what would ultimately happen was we would start talking business, right? And one of them made a comment one time about how they were sick of listening to the Mike and Dan show every time that we got together. And so we decided to spite them and make a show called Collecting Keys. We originally just going to call it the Mike and Dan show. We figured since it was going to be around real estate, it needed to be a little bit more specific. So now we have the Collecting Keys podcast, and on Wednesdays we record a sort of dialogue episode where it's like Dan and I just talking about our general business that is like doesn't have guests or things like that, and we call that specific segment the Mike and Dan show. So it was mostly just as like started as a joke, and then we enjoyed it, and then people started listening, and now we've been doing it for about 2.5 years.
Well, there's nothing better than starting a podcast to spite your wife.
Right. Exactly. You know, and the funny thing is at least my wife, she listens now on occasion. And it's always great when we like get in her car and her Bluetooth switches on and it goes to one of our episodes. And I'm like, oh, I gotcha. You know, because she always immediately gets embarrassed and switches it off.
That's awesome. So you focus on scaling real estate investing. It's kind of a particular interest and focus for me as well. Like what I'm guessing some of those questions and concepts are coming from questions that you've been receiving.
Yeah, a lot of it, right? And the niche, I guess, around the scaling portion of the real estate business came around mostly because like that's what we became passionate about as our business grew. So when we started our business 5 years ago, me and Dan, my co-host, my business partner, we did real estate like most people do, where it was us out hustling, right? And we were walking all of our own houses. We were setting up our own marketing campaigns and things like that. And then as we started to scale, you know, we built a team. We figured out how to systematize a lot of the quote unquote challenging parts of the business, like the sales process and the follow-up process and all those things. And then when we started the show, we would have people that reached out to us asking traditional newbie questions that you can get on, you know, larger shows or just on watching YouTube videos, things like that. And we found that we would get most excited to engage with people when they had questions around the business side. And so we started a community. It's called Scale. And the focus of that is obviously around scaling, right? And so we decided to go away from just like traditional real estate talk and instead go into the actual business of being a full-time real estate investor, particularly on the residential direct-to-seller side, which is specifically what we specialize in. So learning how to market, learning how to find distressed sellers and actually do that at a level of scale that's more than just like a couple deals per month. And I guess for context, we do a couple hundred deals a year. I currently have 25 people on my team, and we have a whole like sort of corporate hierarchy that we've built out through that.
So how long did it take you to build to 25 team members?
It took us a couple years, and I would say 2 tries. So the first time that we started to build it out, we got to a handful of markets and we were at about 12 team members. We had a third business partner at that point. We had a separation, some different sort of, you know, conflicts on our growth goals. And we separated from our third partner, and the entirety of the team went with him except for 2 people. So we went down to 4. And this was at the beginning of 2013. And we were able to take those lessons that we learned and scale it ourselves. And we, since the beginning of 2013 to when we recorded this for this show, which is like the middle of May 2024, that's how long it's taken us to go from a team of 4 to a team of 25. And now we're currently active in a dozen different markets.
Would you mind sharing what caused the separation? What was the differences there?
Yeah, I mean, it was a different in, I would say, desire of what growth was going to look like and what our roles were going to be. The third partner that we had at that point, the anticipated role for him was to basically run and manage the sales process and the sales team, because that's what his background was in. And then ultimately, as it started to grow, we found out that he actually didn't have a desire to do that at a scale of more than like 1 or 2 people. He didn't like the hiring process. He didn't want to build something out that was going to be as robust as we needed in order to grow. And then also too, at that point, sort of finishing out 2022, the market was getting a little bit rocky for residential real estate. And that's where you learn who really has the gusto to make it in the business, right? Because when you're not able to hit home runs on a regular basis, people were getting washed out in 2022, and he was one of those people, and he just decided he wanted to go different.
Okay. Well, knowing what you know now, what type of decisions would you have what changes would you have made in the decision process in partnering with that person or making any kind of partnership?
Yeah, I think we would have had more of a discussion around what our long-term goals were. And to be fair, it was kind of tricky at that point because none of us really knew. We were all still like slightly new to real estate. We had also, not real estate, we were slightly new to business and like scaling businesses. And we had all been coming out of like one of the biggest economic booms, especially in the real estate market that we had ever seen, right? And so we didn't fully know what the downward implications were going to be. And so that's a big thing that I would have done a little bit differently. We also, we made the cardinal mistake that so many people make when they start partnerships, where we did not explicitly outline and state everyone's roles and expectations. And so what happened, me and my original business partner, Dan, who's my co-host, we've been together for 5 years. We were just with this one partner for a year, and he joined us at about year 3. So Dan and I, we had kind of a unspoken relationship. We kind of knew what the other person was going to do. And now we brought in a third person, and we didn't have that historical friendship and that historical relationship. And so he basically came in and just tried to get by with doing as little as he could because it was never fully outlined. And that's something that we always tell people when you're starting partnerships is make sure that you're very explicit about what you need to do, and also make sure that that person you're partnering with is actually someone that is good partner material and shouldn't just be an employee or a team member. Because also in hindsight, instead of bringing on this person as a partner to run that role, we really should have just looked at hiring a sales manager, right? That we could have paid $100,000 a year and not given up a third of the business at that point. They would have been just as effective, and they would have automatically had a defined role because it would have forced us to put that together instead of expecting someone to come in and be a partner.
Other than this third partner, what was your next hire? Our
first hire was an acquisitions manager, which is about 5 years ago, and when we were still pretty early on in the business. So when we first started, we were doing everything for ourselves for about 10 months, and we were generating leads. We had a pipeline that we were building up, through different direct mail systems and cold calling and things like that. And we had done, about 6 or 7 deals before I actually went to an in-person meetup for a community I was in, and the coach that was there basically looked through our system, and he was like, I don't understand why you're not closing more deals. He's like, I think maybe you're just not a good salesperson, which was totally valid. And so we came back from that and decided to bring on our first acquisition manager. And that process for us took us from kind of struggling to get deals done to start doing things on a very consistent basis. And just bringing on that first salesperson alone, she closed 7 deals in her first 2 weeks. And we had our first 6-figure month as a business that first month that she was with us.
Did you have to go through any kind of mindset shift to see this first hire as an investment versus an expense?
Yeah, we definitely did, especially because at that point, we were in that phase of business where we were not profitable. Everything that was being made was going right back into the systems, and we were not making any money. And when we made this first hire, we didn't even have like reserves to pay this person. We literally had $3,000 in our business bank account. And our thought process was, we're going to have enough to pay them 1 month base, and then they're going to have to get commissions in this first month. Otherwise, it's going to get real weird at the end of the month when we're no longer able to pay this person. And sure enough, she came in and hit it out of the park and was able to start earning some commissions really early. And then once that money came in, the big mindset shift, honestly, was not focusing on replenishing our investment that we'd made in the business so far, and instead reinvesting and seeing the big vision about what our ROI could be by investing in the business.
When you added this acquisitions manager, it sounded like your business picked up quite a bit. I mean, she was closing 7 in that first month. Was it 7 that first month?
Yep, 7 that first month.
What else what was the dominoes that fell at that point? I'm sure you would have had to now come up with creative ways to acquire these properties, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the big thing that changed with her, right, was we now had somebody that was spending their entirety of every day working the leads that were in the system. Okay. And the benefit that we had is we had already been operating for about 10 months. And so we had a pretty large backlog of stuff that we were not nurturing correctly ourselves, because on top of, doing all the administrative work, running the marketing, we had a VA that was pulling lists and doing things like that. And then both Dan and myself were out managing contractors and things on properties that we had purchased. So for us, the actual acquisitions and that whole sales process was kind of like a thing that we did a couple hours a day if we were lucky. And so having somebody now that was doing that full time allowed us to explode. And a big thing that we started doing was learning to explore different kinds of monetization opportunities for leads. So we got really into wholesaling at that point. We did a ton of wholesales. We still do. We really got into different creative financing structures, doing seller finances, understanding subject twos was a big thing that we started to explore at that point, which is a little bit tricky because this is 2021. So the market was still booming. And then we got into doing realtor referrals and things like that. And ultimately the goal came to, we're going to have people that are going to call us. How do we find as many opportunities as possible as we go and build out that marketing system? Because we recognize that if, we viewed everything as a nail, right, and we weren't a hammer, that was going to be a problem, right? So it just came down to learning to be sort of creative and being able to pivot when things just didn't make sense with the traditional cash offer style approach that we were doing originally.
You mentioned that you had a consultant or a mentor of some kind help you, you reviewed your pipeline and told you that you suck at sales, as you put it. Yeah. What made you decide to take that step?
So that was a big way that we got started. So way back before I started working with Dan, my original backstory is I was a corporate engineer for 5 years. And then in 2018, I quit my engineering career and just decided that I was going to figure out anything else to do. So I spent a couple of years working in a gym and driving for Uber and just sort of hustling to get by. And in that period of time, those 2 years that I did that, I got into flipping houses, but mostly by just partnering with local people. And I had the time and the hustle. So I would manage the contracts and do those sort of things. And then the partners would bring the money and we'd split the deals 50-50. And so I started doing that. And then as I recognized that the velocity of growth there was going to be slow, I sought out education. I sought out a mentor. And so I joined a mentorship program that is not unsimilar from the scale community that we run now. And so it was a group-based program that was all online, had coaching calls a couple times a week. And that sort of helped us build the initial foundation for the business that we now run.
Sure. This scale community, you've brought that up previously. Is that on a platform we're familiar with, or is this something you built yourself?
I mean, it's a handful of different platforms, I guess. So what it consists of, we have our main communities run through Slack, which is like a communication software where everyone's in there, changing information, posting wins, asking questions, things like that. And then we do 3 times a week group calls on Zoom. And then we have the general repeated material around the business processes all through a video course on Kajabi. And, it's a fun thing that kind of came out from the podcast, mostly because people kept asking for it. And honestly, the real estate business is our full-time gig, but scale is kind of my passion project because it's so fun to watch people come into that and really start to grow and go through the same sort of ahas and life changes that I went through not too long ago.
Well, we've been told from the very beginning, where some of the people we hang out with, I strongly feel that masterminds, a community such as this, that is like one of those individuals. You rising tide lifts all boats, if you will. You want to be involved in a community that is like-minded and can support each other.
Yeah, it's such a huge thing that, especially the post-COVID, or we started this kind of during the COVID era, right? It was harder to network with people. And I think a lot of people lost that what they say, that third place. Everyone went to work or they were at home, but you didn't really have a good way to socialize with people that were trying to do similar things, especially with entrepreneurship, right? If you're kind of driven that way. And these online masterminds is a great way to do it because just by the fact that people are willing to invest their own money into joining this group, you automatically have verification that the people are taking things seriously, right? And it's not like going to like a free RIA or a free like business mastermind locally where anyone can come and half the people there are not actually that serious, and it's a fun thing. Like, it's been super valuable. I'm in personally, I think 4 different masterminds for different phases of the business. I'm super active in all those, and it's just a part of like, growing your tribe, I guess, at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've said it time and time again, but until you join one of these groups and experiences it, that again is probably one of the biggest returns on investment you'll ever find.
Oh, 100%. For the first group that we joined, I remember it was $5,000. And I remember sitting outside the gym that I was working at with like the invoice pulled up. And I like barely had $5,000 at this point. Right. And I remember just like really, really, really being worried about paying it and what was going to come out of it. Then I ended up doing it before I went in to coach my class that day. And I mean, that $5,000 investment has directly led to millions and millions and millions of dollars at this point, both in revenue as well as asset acquisition.
Have you found you joining even more expensive groups then?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have one I'm in right now. It's about $30,000 a year. And that's like a higher level entrepreneur focused mastermind. And I have several that are between 5 and 10,000 that I'm also in.
Well, just to remind everybody, check out Mike's show. Go to collectingkeys.com to learn more about what his team is doing there, and maybe even consider joining Scale, the community. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far today, do us a quick favor and share it with one of your real estate investing friends. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. So I'm curious, what is your wife thinking of all of this as you're progressing and scaling and starting a business?
It's funny. I get this question all the time, and I have like the most non-interesting answer, mostly just because I have a super chill wife and we have a very easy relationship. Like I'm very, very, very lucky with that. And even when I quit my engineering job, I get asked what that conversation looked like with my wife all the time, because I think that, it's a huge point of tension, especially when you're the primary breadwinner and you're looking to leave that income. When I made that decision, we didn't have kids. We had relatively low living expenses because I'd been very intentional about that. And, my wife had a job, even though she wasn't making a ton, it was still steady income. And so like when I made that decision with her, literally what it looked like was I was like driving to work and it was like dead silent in the car. And I called her and I just said like, hey, I think I need to quit my job because I was so miserable. And, we sort of had a little conversation about it, what we were going to do. I didn't have any idea, but we agreed that at least I was going to be happier. And so I went and I quit that day. And that was, I would say like the exchange of trust that we had there made it very easy for her to trust in me as we were starting to grow things out, and she was sort of starting to see the work come together. And also it made it very easy for, I would say, me to openly, ask her about, investments we were making or things, because I knew that it was a conversation that we we're comfortable having. And I think that's a big challenge that a lot of people have when they're trying to have this dynamic with their spouses. They just don't communicate and they're not fully honest or not fully open about it at the initial phase. And then the problem is, as you're getting more and more involved, you're investing more money, you're taking on more risk, it becomes harder to have those conversations when you didn't have them from the get-go. And so she's not involved in my business at all. She sort of sees it as a distance, and, she's very, very supportive, but ultimately it's just a pretty easy thing that's just a part of our life. So.
Oh, that's cool. So I'm going to change topics here on you a little bit. I'm more curious now about the actual business and the operational aspect. I would run into people trying to scale all the time. And one of the biggest hurdles that I run into is the documentation of the processes and procedures and all of that. Well, how did you handle that piece as you got to 25 people? I'm sure that's quite a bit of documentation and processes in place at this point.
There is. And I think the biggest mistake most people make is they think that they can do it one time and be done, right? It's like an ever-changing process. We're redoing our processes all the time, especially as we bring on more people. We have new staff members that join. Every time we have a new team member that joins, an opportunity to improve our processes, because they're going to go and poke all the holes that you didn't realize you had because you had things that you thought were obvious, right? And so all of our stuff is documented on a platform called Notion, and we have like a massive catalog of all of our SOPs. In order to build that out, we hired we call him like our systems developer. He's a kind of like an integrator type role that came in, and he has gotten super involved in the business, and he's helped build out a lot of those systems with the help of VAs to actually do the heavy lifting. And our typical process is we'll have someone record it live with a VA or record a Loom, and then you send it over to one of our VAs who actually puts together the hard document that we use, because otherwise it takes an incredible amount of time to just like put together the Word documents, right? And we've done that with pretty much every facet of our business. It's changing constantly. As we've grown and we've had more money to invest, we've started to invest more in technology to do a lot of these systems and automate things. So we have like a completely custom platform that we've built out now that helps alleviate a lot of those complicated processes that we had previously. And, there's never like a perfect way to do that. And as businesses grow, you start to have more and more things that are unique to your business, and you need to recognize that you will have to be constantly doing that.
I'm going to go back to you talking about sucking at sales.
Yeah.
Have you taken any steps to improve yourself when it comes to that? And what did you do?
Yeah. I've taken sales training classes. I've attended workshops, things like that. Honestly, a big area that I've found that has helped me with my sales has been coaching my sales team. And so in general, right, I am the epitome when it comes to that stuff of like, I'm those who can't do sales teach, right? Because I understand the technical parts of it. I understand how to pitch things. I'm just not, for me, where I really struggle with, I think it's because of my engineering background, is the soft skills. So the, rapport building, matching tone, things like that natural salespeople have, I have to force that. And so it's always slightly inauthentic. But when it comes to the tactical portion of sales, I've done a ton of research through books and other things to understand the nuances there. And I've personally found that I have gotten better at it just from reviewing sales calls with my teams, doing sales reviews every day, doing sales training with them, and just in tangent, you can learn a lot by like reviewing the game tapes, which is what we do with all the sales calls. And I've definitely benefited from that as much as they have.
What is the frequency of that?
Every day. Do it every morning.
Oh.
Yep. So that's one of our secrets as well, is we are very, very diligent with how we do our sales reviews and how we do our trainings. And so for 30 minutes every morning, because my entire business is virtual too, I don't have any local team members. And so every morning for 30 minutes, we get the entire sales team together and we do a pipeline review and we do a sales training. And so that's a big part of what we do. That's something we've done since we brought on our first team member. And we have not missed a day, I don't think, in 4 years now, 5 years.
So you do it as a team effort versus one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We'll do it as a team effort for the most part. If someone needs additional training, I'll do that one-on-one. But most of the time I find that the peers learn from each other. And especially once you start to build out a relatively large sales team, you'll find that they actually prefer to seek help from each other as opposed to from you. When you have like one member, team member, two team members, will always come to you, right? Because you're their boss. But now we have people that have been with us for a couple of years. That's kind of like the senior. And so the new guys, if they have questions, they'll go talk to Dave, who's the name of our more senior acquisitions guy. And that makes it sort of a self-sustaining organism, which also makes it easier to grow.
When you onboard your sales team, this is just the experience I've had. I tried to use VAs at one point, for example, and for the life of me, I couldn't get them to think outside of the script.
Dude, it's so hard. It's really, really challenging. And this is something, even yesterday in our L10 for our leadership meeting, we were discussing this, is how do you do that? Right. And the problem with it, I think, is that, they don't necessarily know what they don't know. And even if they are an experienced salesperson on the real estate side, they don't necessarily know what your limitations are as a business or what your desires are. A lot of it comes from reps and like direct coaching. Typically when we have a new salesperson, I'll do a little bit more direct one-on-one. And so we can regularly be like encouraging the outside the box thinking. That's another thing as well that we do, is when we do the sales calls, how we typically do the sales training is we'll pick someone and I will have them pick a call of like a certain type, right? So I'll say like, hey, can you give me a call for an offer that you made that you think that you did really well on? Okay. And they say, cool. Can you give me a call and an offer made that you think didn't go so great? Can you go and pick me one tomorrow that was like an intake call that you think you missed an opportunity? And so what we'll do is we'll kind of cover a wide range of stuff that are both successes and losses. And as a result, people start to see a huge variety of situations. And just through going through that process, they get exposed to more and the box becomes that much bigger, right? For them to be able to understand. And it takes time. Like the problem is, I think it takes longer than you want it to. Like realistically, I would say it takes 6 months for a salesperson to sort of get that confidence. But it's also, it's a long-term game, businesses. So you kind of need to look at it with a long-term lens.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I find interesting there is that you just said it takes 6 months to get somebody fully wrapped up. I really, more times than not, I don't think people are ready for that level of commitment and expense. And, but they got to get in that mindset that this is something that they have to prepare for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the benefit that I have at this point is, we've done business. And this is also why I like to focus on working with people that are scaling and like developed entrepreneurs, because like my problems and the things that I'm passionate about are not fully applicable to the person that's trying to reach base level financial freedom, where they don't have to work a W-2 job anymore. Right. I've already built out a strong portfolio. I've already made a good chunk of money. Like I'm financially in a very good position. And so the skill set and the stuff that we focus on isn't necessarily relevant to the guy that's trying to buy like a duplex this year. Right. I want the guy that's trying to buy 20 duplexes this year,
Mm-hmm.
And so longer term time horizon, being willing to invest in people, understanding what leadership looks like. Those are very different skill sets from the real estate skills. And they're like the amount of creativity that actually has to get involved and the little nuances that aren't just like cut and paste, like buying a house. People tend to not fully realize that. They want a playbook, but there isn't like a playbook for every business. You can get theories, but you have to be able to understand those theories and apply them to what's necessary for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just want to remind everybody again, it is collectingkeys.com. Definitely check out and subscribe to the podcast. We could go down a number of different roads here, and this has been a great conversation. You've added a lot of value here today. Before we jump into the rapid fire questions, is there a question or concept you think we should have tried to cover?
I mean, I think a big thing that I like to emphasize with people that are newer to this, just so we don't go higher level the entire time. When it comes to the marketing piece of this business, right? The thing that matters the most, honestly, is being consistent about what you're doing. And I've seen this now more than ever. I think it's the rise of the gurus and things like that, or the people kind of selling these get rich quick schemes, or the people building services around real estate investors, right? Is you have all these different people that are pitching the next greatest sort of marketing and lead generation method, where they are like, doing these pay-per leads that are really complicated. They're using AI. They're having these really complex, like, online marketing systems and things like that they do. You don't need to do any of that. Yeah.
There was even a short blitz there of radio.
Dude, radio, yeah, it's a huge thing. Yeah. TV was a thing. Like, and understand that the people that claim that they have the next greatest thing, they're just trying to sell you something, right? And I have no doubt they could work, but the biggest pitfall most people do is they're like jumping around to do all this different stuff. And like with our business, right, we do 20 to 30 deals a month on average, right? And we do the most uninteresting marketing methods that you could possibly think of. We have a cold calling and SMS marketing team. We do direct mail using like the main marketing niche list that you can go and watch YouTube videos to learn about. We just pull those off PropStream and we mail every single month. And we do all of that behind a strong brand with a professionally built website that has like very basic PPC and website retargeting that you can have set up for very, very cheaply, right? And we just do that every single month at scale. And we have nothing super crazy. We have no like fancy secret. We just do, jump shot and bounce pass basketball. And that makes us millions of dollars a year. And there's, when they talk about having boring business, that's all you need. Like, this is literally what they're talking about. And it's not cool. It's not sexy, but it is absolutely what you need to do. And what we always tell people when you're starting out is pick one kind of marketing, do that consistently every single day or every single week or every single month, whatever cadence is appropriate for 3 to 4 to 5 months before you're trying to like jump around and find something new and decide if it's not working.
Yeah. Persistent, consistent behavior will trump everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I just, for new people, just make sure that you're, again, looking at with a little bit of a long-term timeline. It's not a week. Realistically, it's a quarter or it's 6 months, and you need to be willing to put in the work for that period of time with one thing.
Well, I hope you'll consider coming back, because I think we could spend another half hour talking about just how you manage a virtual team the way you do, and what you're doing there, what markets you're going down, what markets you're in, and your current business model based on what you're doing. But if you're ready, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions and save those topics for another time.
Sure, let's do it.
What lie do real estate investors tell themselves and sometimes to others?
I think one of the biggest lies that they tell themselves is that real estate needs to be like a get rich slow game. Honestly, it doesn't need to. It's all about the opportunities that you create for yourself. Like traditionally, real estate's been a get rich slow game when you've had to like save up your money and buy like a property off the market. But when you learn how to create your own opportunities, you can literally add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your net worth and significant cash flow with every single deal that you buy. And I mean, especially the way that we do it, we buy things at pretty heavy discounts. We capture the next 10 years worth of appreciation basically on the day that we purchase. And that's a really big thing that people don't fully understand until they really dive into it themselves.
You're not allowed to say Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Think and Grow Rich, but what book would you recommend everybody checking out, or what are you reading right now?
So the book that fundamentally changed my view on what was possible as an engineer was The 4 Hour Work Week. I know that's another one that's very popular, but I literally remember I was reading that book. I was actually on a vacation with Dan, my now business partner, and I was reading The 4 Hour Work Week, and I was like, dude, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, we don't have to go back to work next week, and it really expanded my view on what in basic entrepreneurship can look like. That was also my first introduction to virtual employees. That's a very big thing that's in there. So that's always one that I recommend people checking out.
I have a huge catalog of audiobooks and Kindle books, and there's just a handful of books that I actually go above and buy the physical copy as well. And that is one of them sitting behind me here.
Yeah. I actually have it sitting right there. If you look between my microphone cord, you can see the orange cover.
Yeah, it's one of those misnomers, because it says a 4-hour work week. I mean, that's a marketing thing, and it's interesting how he came to that title. I mean, that's a lesson in itself. But there's just so many lessons on how to optimize and how to make things way more efficient. Yeah, that's the concept of that book more than anything else.
Absolutely. And as a result, when I started my business, we led with that systemization in mind, right? And also too, the concept that he has in there around like the mini retirements, where you hustle for, 4, 6, 12 months, bank some money, and then you can go and enjoy life. I've taken that into, my personal life a lot. And over the course of the years, my wife and I, we've done month-long trips around Africa. We just got back from 3.5 weeks in Japan. We have a month that we're planning to be in Southeast Asia here later this year. And it's all about, setting things up so that you're allowed to do that and you're financially able to do that.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
It would have been to find a mentor earlier. One of the things that because when I started working with my mentor that helped me scale my business, I was close to 30. And then my first true mentors that I found were actually clients of mine that I had at the gym. They were the guys that would come in that were coming to like the midday class on like a Tuesday. And all of a sudden I would be like, what are these guys doing every day that they're not at work? And a lot of them are real estate guys. And I wish that I had been exposed to that when I was in my early 20s, or at least sought that out, because I didn't even really know that was an option. Like, I was just fully ingrained in the college, get a W-2 path. I think if I'd had a mentor, that would have been pretty different.
Well, don't you think, I'm going to get on a soapbox for a little bit, but public school, college, that it's all indoctrination centers for, as far as I'm concerned, to generate more tax paying employees.
It absolutely is. Like, there's no doubt about that. And I'm actually kind of outspoken, I would say now, against the traditional marketing, the traditional education system that we have, just because it doesn't encourage any sort of creative thinking or problem solving. And you can see that now more than ever, where there's so many people that don't even know how to learn because they never really learned how to learn, right? They learned how to memorize and repeat things. But I feel like I didn't really learn how to like honestly learn and apply things until I got into entrepreneurship, and I didn't have a choice.
What single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to your business?
Single process or tool that was time-saving. I mean, honestly, one of the biggest things I think that's a major time saver is the fact that we are an online business and we have everything that is done via Zoom and via Slack, because nobody in my company, myself included, has any transit time. And I used to drive to work and do different things. When you no longer have that, it's amazing how much you can do in a day. Because it's not even just the fact that you have to like drive to the office, but you drive to the office, you have the, small talk with your team members when you get in there. You go get your cup of coffee, you go and you log into your computer. In that period of time, you check your phone 5 times. That whole process wastes 90 minutes at the beginning and end of every day. And now I don't have that. And so leaning into that virtual sort of environment right out of the start, I think has added thousands of hours of usable time.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the whole 4-hour work week thing again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Mike, this was a fantastic conversation. Again, it is collectingkeys.com to check out Mike's podcast. I highly recommend subscribing to that as well. But I hope you'll come back again sometime. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, just let me know. I'll be here.